sometimes we need to think about who our audience is for the marking. Is it for the leadership team that's coming to check the books? Is it for the parents that the books are going to go home to? Or is it for the learner that's in your classroom? And really, we know it should be for the learner in your classroom. So if you're giving that feedback to them as they are learning and you're marking as you go, nothing tops that.
Yeah, at the end of the day, the marking is for the learner and for the teacher to identify what they need to do to better equip that kid or to help them through their learning journey.
Welcome to Rainbow Skies for New Teachers, where we're all about bite-sized tips and simple strategies for bright and busy new teachers.
If you're in your first few years of your career and want to make the rollercoaster ride of teaching more fun, streamlined and stress-free, you're in the right place.
We're Ashley and Alicia, the dynamic duo from Rainbow Sky Creation, and we're excited to be your teacher mentors on the go. There are rainbows ahead, my friend.
And together, we're unstoppable. Let's get into today's episode.
Rainbow Sky Creations acknowledges the traditional owners of the land we have recorded this podcast on, the Dharawal and Whadjuk Noongar people. We pay our respects to their elders past and present and extend that respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander cultures.
Here we are back again with Rainbow Skies for New Teachers. A warm and happy welcome to you, our friend.
Yes, welcome and thanks for joining us today.
We have got a great episode because this one is going to be just practical advice that you can use in your classroom straight away. But before we do, I found out a really interesting fact yesterday.
Hit us with it, Ash.
Did you know 50% of the population don't know their left from right?
That's a really huge statistic.
It is. Now, I am going to guarantee that Alicia knows her left from right. You don't you?
I do, but it took me a long time. I was that kid in year one and I still remember sitting in the back little section where they're like working with people on their lefts and rights. And I think the easiest thing is the hand trick of holding up.
I still have to use the hand trick to this day as an almost 40-year-old because I don't know my left from right.
Do you find it's when you're giving instructions to people or if you're driving in the car, you're like, they said left, which one was that?
I feel like the car's a bit easier because I know what side of the car I'm sitting on when I'm driving, which is the opposite side to anyone who may be listening to this in America or Europe. We drove on the other side of the road when we lived in Dubai. But no, I would never give instructions saying turn left because I just don't know my left from right. And I always thought it was because I'm left-handed. My sister is also left-handed. She's probably going to kill me for saying this on the podcast, but who cares? She's left-handed too, and she doesn't know her left from right. So we were always like, it's because we're left-handed, like maybe we have some spatial thing. But yesterday I was at the optometrist with my daughter, and she said, no, it's a really common thing. 50% of the population can't decipher between left and right.
So it must be this really little part in your brain that just didn't connect and your neural pathways are just never growing there. They're just staying stagnant.
Yeah, I'd be interested to know if other people like out there are listening feeling relieved because they don't know left from right either or feeling like I'm such a dummy.
No, I definitely know in my Pilates classes and there's one instructor who always like holds her hand up. She goes, I still can't remember my left from right, guys. Don't hold it against me. So no, there's definitely many people out there. Obviously, 1 in 2 people.
Yeah.
So I guess for teachers, if you've got kids in your class who still don't know their lefts from rights, just submit to it and give them tools and strategies to work with it because it's going to be a lifelong challenge for them.
Yeah, the hand trick. Just teach them the hand trick and you can discreetly do that everywhere and work out your left from right that way. All right, speaking of being left-handed, today we're going to be talking about marking student work. Hate it or love it, Alicia?
Out of all the jobs I have to do as a teacher, I actually don't mind marking. And like with learning your lefts and rights, you come up with tools and strategies to make it more efficient. And that's what we're going to talk about today. We're going to try and make your life easier so that marking becomes a quicker process. But my question to you is, how do you feel about marking, Ash?
When I used to play pretend schools as a kid, it was my favorite part was the marking. But as a teacher, I feel like it's a time suck, honestly.
Yeah, I don't feel like every single piece of work needs to be marked thoroughly. And I think that's what could kill your joy as an educator. And it can kill the learners in your classroom, the sense of learning and that mistakes are a bad thing because I feel like they're getting critiqued all the time. The only subject I really find annoying when it comes to marking is writing. or writing a
Yeah.
big piece, I find that's hard work for my brain. And I get a little bit caught up on, hang on a second, what am I actually focusing on? And if I'm not focusing on the spelling here and I'm looking at the grammar and the sentence structure, I'm just going to focus on that. Yeah. It's an interesting discussion at every school I've worked at on how thorough you are to mark and what's your expectations at the different types of schools you are when it comes to marking. And that's why one of our tips is, and I'm going to say it right now, get a personalized stamp. Stamps are your saving grace when it comes to marking because it's a way to identify that you have cited and seen something. Look, we're going to delve a bit more into this and just really come up with some practical strategies for you.
Yeah, because we're all about being practical here. I've got a really big mindset block when it comes to marking because I have worked in schools where it was expected that you marked every single piece of work extremely thoroughly, and the leadership team would check the books to make sure that the marking was up to scratch. And I was actually on a leadership team where I had to go and check people's books and go and talk to teachers about their marking. And there was this one young teacher. He was so lovely. I'm going to give him a shout out, Blake. You're an awesome teacher, Blake, if you're listening to this. And I remember having to have a conversation with not marking his books well enough. And that was so shit.
Oh, for sure. And I bet Blake had this amazing rapport with his classroom because he took time to connect with them, to actually teach and be immersed in the lessons and not spend time in marking piddly little unnecessary things. Because think about it, when you are in the classroom, is someone there with a checklist marking everything that you're doing and critiquing everything you're doing? No. And you know what? You wouldn't want to be a teacher if that was the case. So I think we sometimes need to turn the lens on the learners in our classroom and be like, do you know what? I think if I can take away one thing where I'm going to impart some skill or tool into this lesson for that kid, then that's a win. And I don't have to mark every single piece of work to do that. I think that poor leadership team you're on and having to micromanage other teachers is just one, it's not going to build your staff morale really well. So anyway.
No. I know. It's a bit of a shocker. I wonder if they still do that at that school. One of the girls that I was on the leadership team with still works at that school, but much higher up. I might ask her. I might just, next time we catch up for coffee, just say, do you still check the books and the marking? I'd be really interested to know. One other thing I am going to say before we dive in, because I think that this kind of sets a bit of a premise around this same idea, is I worked with a teacher once and she was talking about her experience. She was in year 2 or year 3. And she wrote this beautiful story, and the teacher came in with a red pen and circled, she wasn't a very good speller, circled all the words that she got spelt incorrectly, then went in and added in all of any feedback she wanted to give her. New paragraph here, you need to add in some commas here, la, 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 perhaps write this, and she changed some of the words. And she even said, as a teacher, years and years and years later, her thought was, hey, I worked really hard on that, and then you've just come in and drawn all over my work. When she told me that story, it really resonated with me. I was like, it was an aha moment.
And it makes me think, I go, oh my gosh, how many kids have I taught don't really like writing because I've gone and ripped into it or I've gone and corrected it. And I myself, I actually find I do writing, but there's a real mindset block against it of thinking, oh, it's not really good enough because I've probably spent my whole childhood of people just going chopping and cutting into it. And I feel like
it wouldn't make you feel good about it. I write all the blogs for Rainbow Sky and I send them to Alicia and she reads them and edits them and adds in any bits and pieces. If that came back with like red lines all through it, it would be awful. I've got actually one other story. When I was in my first year of teaching, we had a new assistant principal and she wanted to overhaul all of the assessments in the school. So we would have to write the assessments on this special performer, hand it into her, and then she would check it and send it back. But she would always check it and she would get out that red pen and she would go wild. And at first, nothing was up to her standard because we were learning. And I remember just hating it. It was awful. And we're doing that to our kids. So I think we need to be talking about this as like something that we're weaving throughout this episode.
Yeah, absolutely. To just be conscious that when we're marking and the impact it can have, I feel like we don't want to add load to you beautiful teachers who are doing the best that you can. But maybe if we have a look at it from a different perspective, and I've got the pause on that one because I'm like, let's just try and take our marking and then look at it at a different perspective. So we're going to really try and give you some tools here that are going to save you time, save you energy, and not make you feel bad about not marking every single piece of work. And we've got workarounds for it to look like you've marked the work if you're at a school where they feel like you must do that for every single piece.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, let's dive in to number one. The first one is probably my favorite. And if you've been listening for a while, you'll know why. But organization is absolute key. So have a spot with all the things that you need ready and handy in one place so you can easily find them to start marking. So your red pen, if you use a red pen, I'm not a red pen lover. I love to use a purple, green, or a pink pen. Your stamps and stickers. That way, when you need to mark, you've got your bits and pieces ready to go. We love like a lunchbox that you can often keep those things in, or even a pencil case. I know I started my first years, I had a pencil case that just lived in my second drawer down, and it had my pens and my stickers and stamps and everything in there. I feel like collections these days are much bigger than what is needed for a pencil case, but you don't need a million stamps. So if you only have one or two, perfect.
Yeah. Organization is the key. My actual marking tool was a 4x Bic pen and a stamp. And the other thing I was notorious for doing was just taking kids' pencils and texters and marking with that and a highlighter.
Oh, yeah.
A highlighter is a really good tool to have, and it's sometimes not as confronting if you're just highlighting a section and you just give, oh my God, verbal feedback and say, hey, have a read of that sentence. Do you think that could sound better? Or that question, I used to love to do it with maths and just highlight a question and just go, have a think about that.
It's not as aggressive, is it? The old highlighter.
Yeah. No, not at all. It's a little bit delicate, a little bit more prettier. Our next tool for you is to mark as you go. When you are doing a whole class lesson, or you just maybe set 10 minutes aside during the end of your main lesson, that you go and you just over the shoulder, just do a little mark, or just check in with that student, or just get a stamp and stamp whatever work they've done that you can see, like definitely in the early years, right? In the early years, they're doing some work that doesn't need very detailed marking. You just stamping that or just doing a little signature goes, yeah, I saw that. Great. High five.
Yeah, definitely. This is the one that I do when I have to tackle writing in particular. I mark as I go. So we set our kids up, off they start writing, and then I'm walking around to students and I'm giving them that one-on-one feedback, but I'm marking bits and pieces as I go. So then when at the very end, when we're finished, and there may be a big piece of writing that you need to mark, you may have marked half of it already.
Yeah,
Some kids you may have marked all of it, and it's like a little bonus.
for sure. Especially when it comes to writing and you're doing like a big narrative piece or like an informational piece, is like naturally you're going to teach that lesson in parts. So if you're teaching the introduction, that's all you're working on for that lesson. I used to just get the kids to come up to me and be like, all right, you've done that paragraph. Let's have a look at it together. And I'll just mark as I go. And like Ash said, you've done like half the class before you get to the end of that lesson. Try and break your marking into little bite-sized pieces as well by marking as you go.
Yeah. So just one more thing that I feel like we didn't give enough airtime to was Alicia said, as you're going around and you're marking, you're giving the students that verbal feedback. You're actually giving them timely feedback in the moment while they're doing the learning. And there is nothing better than that. One of the things that I was thinking when we were talking about introducing this topic was sometimes we need to think about who our audience is for the marking. Is it for the leadership team that's coming to check the books? Is it for the parents that the books are going to go home to? Or is it for the learner that's in your classroom? And really, we know it should be for the learner in your classroom. So if you're giving that feedback to them as they are learning and you're marking as you go, nothing tops that.
Yeah, at the end of the day, the marking is for the learner and for the teacher to identify what they need to do to better equip that kid or to help them through their learning journey. At the end of the day, you'll get in touch with the parents and you'll be that gateway, that pathway to that discussion with the parents, but they're not in the classroom there. So at the end of the day, have a think to yourself, am I doing this to benefit the learner? Are they going to benefit from this feedback that I'm giving them, from this marking that I'm giving them? If the answer is yes, then great. And if you are still at a school that does portfolios or you are collecting evidence work, then that's when you have to put a little bit more work aside away from school to put together a little rubric and just stick it on or whatever it might be. And that's when it's becoming as well still for the student to identify and track their journey, but also there as for the school and the expectations they need to meet and yada, yada, yada. But think about what you're doing in your classroom is for the kids. So how is that benefiting the learner right then and there?
Absolutely. Okay, the next one is something that I've always done, and it's designating a marking spot in your classroom. So having one spot that the kids go and leave their books open
Yes.
on the page that they are working on or have worked on. And it's the same spot every single time. So no one gets confused. You get to see all the books. It becomes a nice, easy routine. It becomes a routine for you as a teacher because you can glance in that spot and see if there's any marking that you may have forgotten about or that's built up over the course of the day. But get them to leave their books open. I can't believe it. I worked as a casual teacher in a class many years ago, and I had to mark their work, and they all just put their books like in a pile or clothes. And I was like, what? You expect me to open up every single book to then find the work to mark it? Like, that's crazy town. So let the kids help you with a little bit of that hard work to begin with.
Yeah, for sure. I had 2 spots, one at the back of the classroom and one at the front of the classroom. And then for books, and then you might just want to have a little tray for them just where they put their papers in, or it can be in the same spot. But yeah, oh my goodness, make sure it's open, my friend. There you go. You've saved 5 minutes of your life right then and there, and then some. Now, the next one is group when marking. So choose a group of students to leave detailed feedback in their books each day. So if there is an expectation at your school to be giving really detailed feedback, allocate students on a certain day and be like, you're naturally going to have kids groups. So whether you just pick a reading group and you're going to mark all their work really detailed that day, or you've done your maths groups or whatever it might be, and you go, you know what, I'm going to give some feedback. We used to do for certain works what went well and even better if. So there might be just 5 kids for that day where I'm going to look at a piece of work and go, wow, that really went well. I'm going to give written feedback. And then I'm going to write even better if, can we practice writing that sentence with punctuation marks or using more adverbs? And actually, as a little cheat, what I used to do is you can get sticky notes and just cut them up, or little paper slips, the sticky paper identifiers. Say if you need to sign documents.
Yes.
Yeah, the sticky tab. I used to put them into my students' books. And then if I close them and put them in their tray and they saw one of those hanging out, they go, oh, Mrs. left a little note for me about some work I've done. There's something I need to do in there. And I'd put a little highlighted box around it and they would have to go and complete it. And that would be part of their follow-up in a reading group, maths group, morning activity, whatever it might be. But it came back of going, hey, kids, I care what you're doing. I might have not had the time during that day to see it, but I saw it and this is what I thought about it. And hey, come show me how you've made it even better.
I like that too, because you are leading them to the feedback. So the marking is for a purpose. You're marking the work, you're giving them the feedback, you're teaching them to go and have a look at that feedback in order to make improvements. I think that's one of the things the mistakes that we make, is that we are giving them feedback. And if you are at a school where you're expected to give detailed feedback, are the kids reading that? Are they taking that on? It goes back to that. Who's that audience? Who's the audience?
That's right.
And the marking.
And say we're using writing, for example, you're going to have kids who are working on their sentence structure, and that's probably your focus for the term. And that's what you're really going to be giving their feedback on. And then you've got kids who are like superstar writers. They understand the structure, but they're really working on building their vocabulary. So think that's what your feedback's going to be for that term, for that kid, or for that 3-week block. Don't overcomplicate it. Think, what's that one thing we're working on? And I'm going to keep building on that. And if it's for their maths, just think they're really struggling. We're doing subtraction and they're really struggling with the regrouping. So I'm going to give them exposure to questions on that sort of skill. So yeah, it does involve you having to be a bit of a chameleon on being able to switch between different needs that students have. But that's the amazing skill of a teacher. You just start to know what kids need in your classroom. And if you're starting on your teaching journey, you're probably going to be like, that's a bit ridiculous for like 25 kids. How will I know? Trust me, you will know. You will walk into that class and you could tell anybody who walked in, like on your admin leadership team, and be like, that kid's working towards that. That kid's working towards that. You'll just
You will. And that's where, coming back to this point where grouping for your marking can come in handy. If you're finding it overwhelming, that's fine. Pick a group, pick a reading group or a maths group, focus on them, giving that feedback. What Alicia said, maybe putting a little tab there for kids to go back and have a read. Everyone else, you're just skimming through and you're making sure, just giving it a check. And then following day, choosing another group. This is how I got around that leadership team that wanted that really detailed all the time, was I grouped a marking and my students.
Good one.
All right, next up, let's skip the bookwork altogether. Not everything has to be written in a book.
No, that's what we're all about at Rainbow Sky. Think about how you can make this hands-on. Can you get a whiteboard? Can you get them to record it on a sticky note? Can they just talk to each other? Oh my gosh. Do hand signals, play a game, whatever it might be. Skip the bookwork. Keep it hands-on. That's what we're all about at Rainbow Sky Creations. We're all about how can you bring the real hands-on, real life discussions, kids talking with each other, playing games, recording it on a whiteboard, on a sticky note, you name it. We can have work that is done by students that isn't done in their books, isn't done on a piece of paper. So evidence, if you need to get evidence, what do? You take a photo and there's your evidence for whomever may want to see, were your kids learning in the classroom? Yeah, they're playing this game and they recorded it here.
Yeah, it's fun for kids too to have those fun, hands-on, engaging activities. Even if it's just a whiteboard, it's just so much more of a novelty than writing in your book. And it also allows for kids to make errors because it's not set in stone when they write on a whiteboard. It's so easy for them to erase it, much easier than having to erase in their workbook or if they're using pen. So that's another great thing about whiteboards is it allows them to take those risks in their learning. And we know that good learners take risks and they have a go. And that's what a growth mindset's all about. So think about ways that you can skip the bookwork. Think about ways that you can really get your kids involved in hands-on fun activities. If you're lost and you don't know where to start, come and check out our website. We've got loads of different activities and ideas and just ways to engage students that we have used in our own classrooms that work a treat.
Yes. And we know if you're listening right now, that resonates with you and you're like, yeah, I do that all the time. Our next one is to mark as a class. There's nothing wrong with that. You're having to do your set grammar book or spelling book. You just go, all right, cool. Everyone's up past question 4. All right, get your marking pencils out, whatever you want to use. Let's mark it together. Or you've had to set homework and it's a bit of like drill homework with like maths questions. Be like, all right, let's see how everybody went. Get your mental maths books out and off we go. We mark it together. It saves time. And guess what? Your kids are getting instant feedback straight away at how they're going with that concept.
Yeah, you need to do a bit of training for this at the beginning of the year because it can be a bit chaotic if you haven't really set up that routine. Tell me, Alicia, what do you think about kids swapping books to mark?
Oh, do you know what? Used to do it back in the day when I first started because I felt like it was the thing to do, but now I would never do it.
Yeah, same. I have done it, but I don't feel comfortable about it now. I think that it's important that the kids are marking their own work so they can see their own mistakes, but we don't want any embarrassment that comes with learning either. I feel like that needs to be taken off the table, and sometimes putting their book in front of someone else can put them in a really vulnerable position.
And then in my head, I'm like, why did I even do it in the first place? Was I doing it because I thought the kid would like cheat and rub out and change the question? If they did, well, that's a pretty good skill. Like in my head, I go, why was I doing it? And I don't really have a valid answer apart from maybe they would have marked it correct when it wasn't. So
I think that's why we used to do it. I feel like it was a real thing.
Oh.
That teachers did it. Like it was everyone did it. But yeah, I think it's because they would cheat, but also they're in year 4. Who cares?
Or even if you are doing it with little kids, I guess as well, it's what we did as kids.
Yes.
As kids of the 80s and 90s, it's what you did. I feel like I'm getting like a nostalgic moment here. What would our advice be? Get the kids to mark their own work. They're getting instant feedback straight up. And if the kid's marking it and they're going, I'm doing really bad, I'm not getting anything right, it's probably going to sit with them and be like, wow, I really need to work a little bit harder on this. Or I might need to ask the miss for some help.
Yeah. I would always say when kids mark their own work, never to do a cross because I just felt like that was so negative. I think that goes back to the red pen thing too. I didn't like red pens because I just feel like it's really aggressive. So I'd say to them, give yourself a little neat tick if it's correct. And if you got it incorrect, just put a little dot just to know, okay, this is a dot. We need to come back to this.
Yeah. No, I'm the same as you, right? I feel like the red pen has a really bad rep and I used to use it more than what I probably should, but I'm there going, isn't that funny? But I think maybe this is a reason why teachers like marking as well. They get to use so many different pens and teachers love stationery. So
that's true. Well, speaking of stationery, next up, and you've already mentioned this at the beginning, but it deserves a second mention, is make a marking investment. So a personal stamp can be a massive game changer. If a student's work just needs to be checked, you can just stamp that bad boy and you are done. Checked by Mrs. Smith.
And I think one other one is worthy of an investment is one that says verbal feedback.
Oh,
If you got people who are checking your books and they can say, oh, they gave verbal feedback, you can be like, yeah, done. I spent years just signing work, like doing a little signature. So but nowadays, there's so many good stamps out there. So treat yourself to a stamp collection.
Yeah, there's this fabulous teacher, Miss Honey Teachers, and she has personal stamps. So maybe go and check her out for a personalized stamp. I actually taught with a grade partner. We were job sharing just for 2 terms and we were both Mrs. Smith. It was so good. We could pool our personalized stamps together.
Oh, so convenient. Now, our next tip for you is batching. So if you have comprehensive assessments to mark, like in my head, I'm thinking maths tests, like these are ones where you usually got to cut quite a few pages, batch it out, get those papers out and go, all right, I'm going to mark the first page and mark all the first pages and then mark the second page. If you're doing like batching out writing, like marking, like put time aside that going, I'm going to get my head into the zone for marking this assessment. You might not get all of them done in that 1 hour block, but you're going to make a good headway on it. And the same goes of if you're doing any form of a PAS or a big project, go, I'm going to pick 5 kids. This 1 hour block, I'm going to get that done. So batch it out. You're not switching gears. Your brain's in the zone. It's going to save you time and energy. We promise.
Batching's a good one. We recommend it in all sorts of time-saving ways. I know we've spoken about it on the podcast before, and we've spoken about it on our blog. So batching is a great one. Okay, the next one is all about printable marking keys.
Oh, I love this one. I actually learned this from one of my lovely grade teachers, Miss Elise. I'm going to think back here to like portfolio times. This is when these were created. But say you're doing a assessment, for example, I'm just going to pick a like hands-on assessment that we love. We got like these number flowers. It's like our place value, like a number of the day put into a flower. And right then and there, the kids are showing all they know about their place value skills. So you could just make a little marking key. Now, if you are familiar with mathletics, they do this very similar with their assessments. So you just get a little piece of paper and down the bottom, you're going to go, were they able to identify 3-digit numbers? Were they able to round to the nearest 10? Were they able to identify their number on a number line? And you're literally saying they can, you tick it. If they weren't able to do it, you're not ticking it. So it's an indicator of going, you need to work on this outcome. So you can just have, these are like, if you're doing a main assessment, you can just go, all right, what are my main areas that I'm marking that I need to link in with my report writing, whatever it might be, pick those 4 or 5 things, print that off a class set, and then you just literally glue it into on top of the book or whatever it might be. You're not going to do this for every single piece of work, but think about anything that's like a big piece of work. Can you make a little marking checklist that's going to be helpful for the students and helpful for you? Remember, is it going to be helpful for the students? Yes. And if it's going to be, and it's going to be helpful for you too. That's great.
Yeah. And there's no writing required there. You can just tick down yes or no, and then away you go.
If you are a sticker person, like you get those big batches of like 24 little stickers and you come up with a template, and that's what I used to do. And I used to just be like, this is my sticker layout, and I'd get that document up, copy and paste the 4 objectives, and then I'll just print it off. I had them all on stickers and I could just stick them on, and the kids could stick it on themselves. And this is actually great for peer assessment. If you've got 3 things you want your students to be marking of their peers or like marking of their own work, even if you just want self-marking, you can do the same and go, here, these are the 3 things. Have a look at your work. Do you think that you are up to scratch on it? And we're looking here from your middle primary upwards. You can start introducing it to the early years if this is something that's really encouraged in your school. It's possible, but definitely this is something I'd be doing from middle up primary classes.
I really like that idea. They could get a different coloured pen and give themselves a self-assessment first or a peer assessment, and then you can come along. I love that.
Yes, that's actually a really good point of doing it like if you're doing literacy, is them marking with a certain colour and looking at their work, and they can do that with a peer. And then when you come in, you've got your coloured pen.
Yeah.
It's giving the autonomy back to the kids. It's giving them power over their learning.
All right, next up, and this is something I am a big advocate for. Say goodbye to marking homework. Set homework that doesn't need hours of marking. Homework is rarely of a high standard. Let's face it, it often will come in very scrappy, not a high standard at all. It should be designed to support students, not create extra work for you or for them. I know that sometimes isn't the case. If your school requires for you to set homework that limits the marking, it might be reading, it might have an online element. I know my daughter has some spelling words that she needs to work on, and it's just based on the sound that they're working on in that particular week. And then they've got a little grid of activities that they can do. So it might be throwing a ball and spelling out those words, or it might be making those words with pop sticks. It doesn't require them to necessarily write it down. And I think the more we do of this, the better, because we're teaching parents that bookwork and sitting down and just recording things isn't really how education works these days. So we're educating the parents at the same time, but it's also giving you time back to do things that are really important in your classroom, like designing lessons for the kids when they're in your care, not busy work to be done at home. Can you tell I'm on my high horse about this, Alicia?
Oh, it's refreshing because I feel like I've been on my high horse about marking through this whole episode. So, yeah, I agree. Think about people are strapped for time, attention. So, how can you eliminate the stress at home? Because I can guarantee at some point in the year, you're going to get a parent come in and go, oh, it's really hard to do homework. Like it's a real struggle at home to do homework. And you're like, I don't want that for you. Because if anything, I think the research is showing that it's not really that beneficial through the primary years. So think about
Agreed.
what can you set if you have to, what can you set that is going to be quick, engaging for the learner at home, and maybe even an element of connection to happen with family time. The activities that your daughter's got on that grid, she is better if she's got someone on the other side with the ball to help throw it back and
Yes.
forth. If she's creating a game in the back, her siblings might join in. If you're setting like a little game to take home to play, everyone's going to get involved. The child is going to learn a lot more because they're going to have to teach the others in her family how to play that game. And right then and there, she's consolidating that concept a lot stronger because she's having to teach it and talk about it. So there's so many benefits to it. Get rid of the scrap of paper for them to fill in. Think about how you can make it fun, timely, and engaging.
Yeah. Okay, the final point.
Treat yourself.
Woohoo!
If you have a big thing that you need to mark, like I'm thinking assessment time coming up to report writing, treat yourself. Like actually get up from the desk and leave the classroom, leave the building and go do something that brings you joy, whatever it might
Yeah.
be.
You could go and do that marking of that heavy assessment in a cafe, in your favorite cafe, and get your favorite hot drink. It would be a piccolo for me. Find ways to treat yourself because it is just that one extra thing that you need to do as a part of your teaching role. We know that you need to wear so many hats as teachers. There's so much that we need to do. We need to reward ourselves.
Yeah.
We really do, because no one else is going to do it for you.
So think when you're marking a piece of work, if I'm marking this thoroughly, is this going to help me be a better teacher for that student? And if the answer is yes, then it's worth putting that little bit of time in and treat yourself in the process. So think about if you're marking a big piece of work and if this is going to be beneficial for the students, beneficial for you and their learning journey, then go treat yourself. If you've got a piece of work that you look at it and you go, oh, do you know what? The time has passed. Like me giving ample feedback now is not beneficial. We're going to cover this concept again. Get your stamp it, done.
All right, so that is a wrap. Our top tips for saving time when marking. Organization is the key. Have a spot that you keep all of your tools ready to mark. Mark as you go when you can and give that feedback in real time. Have a designated spot in your classroom for the books to go that need to be marked and ask your students to have it open. Group when marking if you need to give more detailed feedback. Skip the bookwork altogether, make it fun, make it interactive, make it hands-on. Our motto here at Rainbow Sky, mark as a class, make an investment by getting yourself a personalized stamp. Try batching your marking. Use printable mini marking keys to help, especially with those assessment pieces. Say goodbye to marking homework. And finally, treat yourself, teacher. You totally deserve it.
Absolutely. So if you found these tips helpful and you're like, you know what, these are really going to help save my time, then we've got just the course for you. It's called Transform Your Teacher Time. We give you 8 focused areas to work on in your teacher world to help you to become so time efficient that you're going to be walking out of that classroom at the end of the day going, yep, I'm on top of this. I don't have to do any more work tonight.
It's a mini course too, so it isn't actually going to take up a lot of your time. You'll be able to get through it, learn some really good tips, some really good hacks, some really good ways to be more efficient in your teacher life. So we will put the link to that in the show notes. Until next week, there are rainbows ahead, my friend.
And together, we're unstoppable.